Good evening. This is a call to order of the regular meeting of the City of Berkeley Planning Commission. Today is May 22nd, 2018. Could you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. McLean, will you call the roll, please?
Barnett.
Here.
Kapelanski.
Here.
Kempner.
Here.
Murad.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
Shadle.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Tangari.
Here.
And Buckler.
Present. We have an agenda for this evening. I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. McLean, could you please call the roll?
Kapelanski.
Yes.
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Tangari.
Yes.
Barnett.
Yes.
And Buckler.
Yes. All right, we have the minutes from the April 24th, 2018 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Second. Any discussion? Comments? Nope. Mr. McLean?
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yep.
Tangari.
Yes.
Barnett.
Yes.
Kapelanski.
Yes.
And Buckler.
Yes. So communications, we have an email correspondence from a resident regarding beekeeping. Do we have any other communications, Mr. McLean, that came in after the
None at this
agenda was
time.
published? Okay. All right. So we will entertain citizen comments at this time for any item not on the agenda. Please approach the microphone and state your name and your city of residence, please. And please try to keep your comments to 4 minutes or less.
Kurt Height, Berkeley. Last month after the meeting, I was accused by Chairperson Buckler of putting words in the mouth of the representative from Carlisle, Wortman. I was expressing concern over the fact that he was basing his opinion of the issues with the PUD by what he had read in the minutes. The chairperson rudely claimed that I had put words in his mouth and that he had really only said reviewed the minutes. And I said at the time that I guaranteed that what he said was read and I would be back with the proof of it. So I earmarked the minutes, and at 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 50 seconds, he stated, I spent a lot of time in doing some due diligence, reading the commission minutes pretty extensively, and at 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 20 seconds, he says, based on what I read in the minutes, down to about 3 major issues. As I said last month, I still feel that is a big problem because the residents had made it known last year how lacking those minutes were. They weren't taken as well as the recent minutes have been done. Tim has done a very great job with them. So not only were a majority of those meetings that he reviewed incomplete minutes because everything was misrepresentative of what the residents were saying, it was also a big problem because those minutes that he read was of a commission who dismissed a lot of the concerns that the residents had till that point. So as I said at the end of the meeting, I did not put words in his mouth. And I even have the recording, if you still don't believe me, that that's what he said, is that he read the minutes. So, I really appreciate you, taking the initiative to be so rude, especially right after the meeting that we had about public participation. If you're interested in having public participation, the first step is why don't you let water go under the bridge and try to extend, be friendly. Don't go out of your way to be rude when somebody's been so kind to you throughout the evening, because that was like a slap in the face. I was very friendly. I had complimented Commissioner Murad, and you just took the chance to insult me with no basis of truth for what you said. Okay? And second thing, a few months ago, Martin Smith took a chance to try to berate me for 20 minutes for using his definition of the use of the word high-rise. Nothing was said when it was referred to high-rise 3 different times last month. All I'm saying is that if you guys are going to refer to it as high-rise, we're going to refer to it as a high-rise as well. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? All right. First order of business is site plan PSP 10-17, 3427 12 Mile Road, Berkeley Marathon. Is the applicant here? Here. Please approach.
Good evening, everybody. I know it's been a while. I believe December was our last meeting.
Around there.
We have a little bit of a revised plan.
Go ahead.
So we scaled it down to 18 by 30 to comply with all the easements and all the other things that we needed to comply with. I brought in a sample of some material to show you guys what we would pretty much be doing with it.
Okay.
And that's about it. Do you guys have any questions?
So I understand that there is not a utility easement there. That was one of the concerns we had last fall, if am I
There
correct?
is not a utility easement.
Okay, very good.
When I went back and looked at it, I was like, wow, the power lines are really quite a distance from that. I don't know why I didn't.
Okay, and you modified the size of it?
We did.
All right. So, commissioners, do you have any comments? Where should I start? Mr. Barnett?
I want to go back to the utility easement for a minute. Did you talk to anybody at Detroit Edison about it?
No, I have not.
So nobody from Detroit Edison was contacted? You just looked at what was on the existing plans?
My surveyor engineer did.
That's all he looked at?
Yes.
But nobody talked to Detroit Edison?
I
Please approach and speak in the microphone, please.
My name is Mon Fike. I'm his engineer and surveyor.
Okay.
I did the original survey on it
Okay.
a while back. I think maybe it was 7 years ago, or more than that maybe. I contacted Detroit Edison. Detroit Edison only have easement on the west side of the property, but not the north side of the property where the power lines goes about 20 feet away from the shed. They don't have any easement recorded. We did
Nothing
a-
recorded?
no,
And
we
they
did a-
and they didn't, no comment about you building a building on
No.
that site? Did you talk to them about
Yes,
building?
if the maximum easement for that power line will be 12 feet wide, 6 on each side.
But they don't have a problem with
No,
it?
they don't, and they
Have
don't,
the lines running over the building?
no, that wasn't, it's not over the building.
Okay,
No, it's
not
It's 20 feet away from the building.
okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Is that side?
I'm set.
Any other questions?
I'll bring it up.
Thank you, Gary.
There was just some confusion as to what the hatched area south of the dumpster enclosure was supposed to represent. I don't see it labeled. So we were just wondering what that was. Is it just to indicate that there's no parking there, or?
That's not a, no parking area.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So it's just similar to the, like, the van accessible?
Exactly, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Just curious. I mean, I guess at this point, I'll just throw it out there. It appears that this is compliant with the ordinance, based on, what I saw in the ordinance, so I have no further questions or any issues with it.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, I tore apart my pile of planning commission drawings that I usually keep. I don't know why I couldn't find the previous one that I'd written all over. And I'll need my memory refreshed. On the south property line,
Yes.
I see a 5-foot setback to the shed, but I also see a dotted line that's a 10-foot rear setback line, and I didn't see anything in here regarding that. Seems like, I'm just trying to, does anybody recall why we have something 5 feet from the property line when it says here a 10-foot rear setback line?
The ordinance states that an accessory structure cannot be nearer to the property line than 5 feet.
Okay.
Right, I believe
But-
that's the setback for a principal structure is 10 feet.
Right,
feet,
right, because here we have a commercial property abutting a residential property.
Right.
And I, I know there was something to this, I honestly just can't remember what it was.
But it is an accessory structure. It's not like
It is an
people are going
accessory
in and out
structure.
of it.
Right.
Okay. Then that might have been the reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is the reason.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm guessing it's probably
Yeah.
you can't exhaustively catalog every thing that might happen when you write an ordinance. It's
Oh,
like some of these
absolutely,
things that come up
absolutely.
and test our ordinances and test our,
Like I s-
and our intention of what the ordinance was
Like I
meant to
said,
be.
I just need my memory refreshed because I could not find my notes from before.
Right.
As long as we're, having a conversation about the ordinance that's going on, that's ongoing, one thing that I'll note is that a lot of ordinances do treat commercial sites differently with regard to accessory structures, where if it's a non-residential development, there really isn't a distinction between principal and accessory structures. You have your structures on the site and they all meet the setback.
Structure is a structure.
Our ordinance doesn't really seem to do it that way. It really, so it's something to consider when we're looking at our ordinance if we don't like that, but as it stands right now, that's not how our ordinance is written.
Do we have any other circumstances in the city where we have an accessory structure that's 5 feet away that anybody is aware of?
I'm positive we do. I can't
sure
think
we
of it. I would guess that we have many that are probably less than 5 feet.
So I guess we have to keep that in mind as we move forward. Mr. Smith, do you have any other comments or
No,
questions?
that's the only thing, and like I said, I couldn't find my notes before, and I'm sure it was on there, but I just couldn't recall what it was, so thank you.
Mr. Richardson?
You brought some samples of the building materials with you. I'd be curious to see
I did. So
what the place is going to look like.
this is a interior
Yeah.
veneer siding. We're going to be doing an exterior. They didn't have an actual sample.
Oh, sure.
But we want to match the building. We want to make it look, we want it to look nice, of course. We got a beautiful city, keep it beautiful, of course. And we're going to I would like to do a charcoal shingle roof. My dad felt like he needed to give you guys an option. I do have some colors. If you guys feel like there's something better, then by all means, go ahead and voice your opinion. I think the charcoal would look the best. If you guys would like this, you're more than welcome to.
Thanks.
Agnostic on the color of the roof.
Mr.
The
Smith
charcoal's
is-
fine.
Mr. Smith is our resident color expert.
Designer.
No, I'm not, my wife is.
Okay.
I don't care.
Yeah.
But my question is, the exterior of the building, you're showing a paneled brick, which is an interior material.
Right. So it's going to look just like this, but it's going to be an actual exterior,
It's gonna be a real
Yes.
brick? A thin brick or a full bedded
a
brick?
thin.
Okay, so you're gonna apply it to the building,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. And on the back of the structure will be fiber cement siding.
Are you expecting it to look like the principal building or resemble the principal building color-wise?
Yes. We want it to match.
And refresh my memory again, what is this building for?
This is for storage for if we're taking a delivery and we're busy in the store, we'll throw it right into the structure.
Okay,
Um,
that sounds right, okay.
Nothing flammable. If we have an old cooler or something that, we don't need tying up in our store, we're going to leave it in there.
Any other comments from the commission? Mr.
Will this
Manhattan?
building be heated?
No.
No? Okay, so what are you going to do with, are you going to be storing liquids out there in the winter
No.
months? No? Okay, all right. And the other thing I had about the retention pond, that's not existing now, right? You're putting that in?
There is a retention.
Oh, is there? Okay,
There's a low area.
okay, all right. That was it?
Any other comments or questions? All right, what is the will of, well, I guess you can sit down. We'll go for public comment this time.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any comments on this from the public? Well, no one is rushing to the microphone, so what is the will of the planning commission?
I'll make a motion to approve the plan as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. McLean, is there discussion? No? All right, Mr.
For-
McLean?
Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes,
Tangari,
Yes.
Barnett,
Yes?
Kapelonsky,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
and Buckler.
Yes. Congratulations, good luck. Thank you. All right. All right, our next item is ordinance amendment, 11 Mile District revisions. It is provided in our packet. I think this has to do mostly with the automobile sales, correct, Mr. McLean?
That is correct.
All right, would you like to tell the commission exactly what we're looking at for the second or third time now?
Second time. I've incorporated some of the changes that were discussed the last time this was before the Planning Commission, which I believe was in March. Did have a chance to review with the city attorney, and he saw no legal issues with the proposed changes. The only other additional thing that we might consider is looking at some of the regulations our neighbors have. They prohibit using, loudspeakers or public address systems, due to the proximity to residential. So that's something we may want to consider.
I think that's a good idea.
I'm fine with that.
Otherwise, if the planning commission is okay with the changes, my recommendation would be to set a date for public hearing.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
We talked about building size on there, making sure that there was a minimum building size. In the last couple meetings, I think we decided it should be at least 400 square feet, so that they're not putting a shack with cars all around it.
And that's something we can do. I looked at other ordinances to see if there was anything about minimum building sizes, and what I've seen has been silent as to building size. However, I'm happy to incorporate that change if that's the will of the Planning Commission.
Are there any other comments on that? Do we have, Ms. Kapelansky?
Would we maybe consider, instead of building size, minimum lot coverage as an option?
Idea.
And that's something we can do in the 11 Mile District. In our schedule of regulations, we currently don't have a minimum lot size in that district. However, for auto sales, that's something we can write in.
I don't know that I necessarily for or against, but it's just another option instead of dictating the exact building size.
What's the downside of restricting the building size? Or doing it via, coverage? What's
The downsize is, I would imagine the downsize is that existing buildings may not meet that ordinance, and they have adequate parking for whatever other reason. And the building would have to be significantly modified, either added to or decreased to make it, eligible. I mean, 400 square feet is still a pretty good size. That's not a shack, by any means. A shack is,
Well, 400 square feet is a two-car
Car
garage.
garage.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's so
That's-
20 by 20. That's my garage. So that's a pretty decent-sized building, and it's definitely not a shack. I mean, a shack would be our 36 square foot where you don't need a permit.
Well, yeah,
shack
you want
mostly.
something that requires a building permit, I think.
So definitely over 3,600 square, or 36 square feet versus, I'm not sure what it is.
So alternately, what if the commission decides to go this route, if we were to do something where we talked about office use for automobile sales as the principal use with outdoor display as an accessory use? So that way we wouldn't be dictating the building size, but we would make sure that the office component was a principal use of the site?
Oh, that's interesting.
They would have no garage then.
It's just a thought.
So I'm trying to think of other communities nearby that have auto sales with small buildings, and I don't think I can think of a few in Royal Oak that they don't have anything near 400 square feet or 400 square feet in size. I'm not sure that a percentage minimum lot cover is required either,
No, I'm sure.
because you could have a double lot, for instance, if you cobbled it together and have a single building. I don't foresee a ton of this on 11 Mile.
I think maybe 500 square feet. Because you would think most of these
Maximum size or minimum size?
minimum size.
Minimum.
That's pretty big.
So the Matrix,
really,
the
because
Matrix
big-
Motors, is that 500 square feet?
Probably is.
But
Oh,
he's a
yeah.
garage.
Okay.
But
He's
that,
not
but
just
that's
sales.
part of what I'm thinking is, you'd think that they'd want to have some sort of garage space for doing service on vehicles, to get them
Or
ready
cleaning
to
them up.
sell. Or
Yeah,
to clean them.
detailing
Well,
them.
that
At least one
depends on the
day.
sales.
Not
That depends on the
necessarily.
place. Sometimes they buy them ready to go.
Right.
They might,
Yeah.
but in some cases, they have, they might have to detail them to get them cleaned up, and so
Well, then would that be a
that would be,
different
that would
use?
be at least one bay and then some office space. Could even be at 500 rec, technically, it could be a small office and 200, two bays, so.
Whatever we do, setting a minimum size, most of our ordinances are maximum coverage.
Right.
It's kind of a different concept. But a minimum size, I understand the thought behind it is to avoid a booth,
Mm-hmm.
a photomat-sized booth,
Booth, yeah,
which we don't want.
right.
I don't believe. I don't, it's gonna come back and haunt us, someone's gonna, it really will. But I have no problem with 400 square feet. If you just
Yeah.
imagine a two-car garage, you can make something of the building,
Right.
Yeah. We're kind of just,
I mean, because even years ago, when we approved the Matrix Motor Building, they did it. I think they had one bay, wasn't it, or maybe it
no,
was two?
it's bigger than that.
They had two
Bigger than
bays,
that.
so, and that was to do,
And there's office
simple
space.
maintenance on
Right.
cars.
Think of a
clean
gas
them up.
station, they have,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm kind of thinking of.
you're gonna need
They
a,
weren't selling at the time. They were.
we
they
never
were-
really knew what they were doing at the time.
No, their job,
think
they were,
they knew.
they were buying
Still
totaled
don't.
cars and fixing them up
I'm
and
not sure I
then
know what
selling
they're
them off
doing
the
now.
site.
Right.
And that's why they have the fence, is because the car, it's kind of unattractive. The cars come totaled and,
Well, when they originally came before us, the fence in front was not there. That was like a
Right.
parking area for customers, per se.
And it
And the
evolved,
storage was all in the back,
it evolved. So,
if I recall correctly.
so what I'm hearing is the will of the commission is to add a minimum building size or a maximum lot, or a
Do-
minimum lot cover size?
I'm leaning toward building size for its simplicity.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, and is 400 the magic number? Is 300 the magic
fine
number?
with
Is
it.
500 the magic number?
I think minimum is 400, I think.
If you think about it, it's gonna be an office, they need a barrier-free toilet room, which is 80 square feet. Not quite, it could be smaller than that, 60. But you start eating up some space, you're gonna need a furnace in there, a water heater, one bay. You're at 400 feet before you get anywhere.
Could I just throw out
Sure, please.
it's not a random thought.
Okay,
Could
Mr.
we,
Richardson.
could we handle the question of square footage in the course of the approval of a special use process? I just looked through the standards, and we have, standards to meet, and I suppose if we thought the building was too small, we wouldn't meet some of those standards, health, safety, and welfare standards. Could we do that?
Well, how do we determine a building's too small when the owner says, I only need 100 square feet?
Because they come forward and we determine it. I mean, that's what we're grappling with, the very same thing now in the abstract.
Yeah,
This would be in the concrete if
So
somebody.
would they
think
apply
so.
for a variance from that? Is that
No,
from us?
I'm just speculating or posing, the standards of approval promote the use of a land in socially and economically desirable manner, compatible with adjacent land use. Designs, the public health, safety, and welfare should be protected, will not cause injury to other property. Well, those standards could be used to determine whether a building is too big or too small.
I think you put a minimum of 400 and go from there. I think
Fine with that.
you need to put something more concrete to it.
I think that lets them know that we want a building, not,
Not a shack.
a shed.
Or a shed.
It says, it starts to set a standard for what we're looking for.
And last night at city council, a question came up regarding conditions for approval, and, the attorney pointed out that reasonable conditions can be imposed. However, with building size, I think if you don't have a minimum, it could be argued that any number that's given could be arbitrary.
Well, we're setting an arbitrary number right now.
We are, but
There
at
is a
least
minimum in the
But
state
you
standards.
just say a
for,
minimum.
Like a
for the
house.
certain dealer licenses, potentially there might be too. I don't know what the regulations are for outdoor sales of cars.
There's for houses.
I don't feel that strong.
But my concern is especially on the path of being RRC certified and all of those things that we're making a clear picture for people when they come to the city of what we expect. I'd hate to see people draw up plans and then get denied because we don't think their building's sufficiently sized, and they could have known that, ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm,
But I think a minimum standard would be the best way to go.
yep.
Yes.
Okay. So do we want to add that as well as the loudspeaker and PA systems element,
Is that something that's in our standard ordinance?
noise?
Yeah, how would that go with the
We have
noise
a
ordinance?
we have a noise ordinance, but it's fairly weak.
Well, I remember back with the Taco Bell and probably a couple others,
Burger King?
Burger King, we beat it up with the, little speaker squawk box out
Yeah.
there.
We did.
And, I don't have a problem saying, we don't want it, but, that's probably something that should be in our thinking ahead of rewriting ordinance. Here's another one to
We
throw
do
in there.
need to rewrite our noise
Yeah.
ordinance,
Yeah.
because there's, much more powerful equipment and different uses of things out there now that were not contemplated when those noise ordinances were written, and it
It's
just
another-
adds to our list.
Someone keeping a list?
Here's the list,
Keeping a list of these items that,
Yeah.
prioritize them as they come up.
It's like, how many years ago did we relook at the lighting ordinance because of LED signs and,
Well, that was just like 3 years
That
ago.
was-
yeah, it was a few years ago.
It's the
So, yeah,
church.
it's change.
Yeah.
And the health clinic,
California's the one that
and
drove
what's a
it.
foot candle, and
Right.
the
And
knit.
And we got into knits, and there's is a way of
We had
converting to
months,
the-
we had several months of discussion on the lighting ordinance.
Mhm.
Several months of nitpicking.
I want to go back there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, all right, so what I'm hearing is we want the loudspeakers and PA systems added. We want, although I'm not sure if there
Or
would
not
be
added.
somebody,
Prohibit,
or
yeah.
prohibited.
Prohibited.
Some, or a portion of the
Must have
ordinance addressing that, and a minimum lot coverage.
No, a
And-
minimum
minimum
building.
I'm sorry,
Square footage.
minimum building
Building
coverage,
size.
sorry, minimum building,
Building size.
building size. Sorry, I had written down lot coverage. I apologize. And then I guess it comes back to us again.
I had a few other things.
Oh, okay. No, that's okay. Add them in now.
So there, it looks like there might have been a typo in D. I think lighting is 4.5, not 3.5, at least when I went to look at it on Unicode. And then I'm wondering if the commission would consider having lighting adjacent to residential uses be 15 feet for the maximum height instead of the 20 feet that the ordinance allows.
I thought we talked about that the last time we were together.
And I agree with that. And I actually think that should be a standard throughout the zoning ordinance personally.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know, maybe that's an amendment to the lighting ordinance section?
I think it
Any
is.
non-residential use
I-
adjacent to a residential be 15-foot maximum height?
And, and shielded and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, yeah, because whether it's a car lot or a
Exactly.
pizza lot
Right.
or the library or whatever, it's adjacent to a residential, it should be short and shielded.
Yep.
And so now we have a little bit of a little sticky wicket on 11 Mile because we approved an 11 Mile property as residential recently, which was going to be lived in by the owner, but now it's up for sale. So
Imagine
does that, I know, yeah.
Well, it's still zoned residential.
Still
It is, it's owned residential and it's a house, but now does that impose new restrictions on its neighbors to the west that weren't there before?
If they put up new lighting.
If they, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, but I mean, if their lighting now exceeds 15 feet.
If their lighting now exceeds
grandfathered
15
in.
feet, it's non-conforming,
Yeah, it's
Non-conforming.
and
grandfathered
it
in.
doesn't have to be changed until it's replaced.
Okay, as long as the owner knows that, or whoever buys the house knows that.
Well, I think on the lighting, we should go back and revise our lighting ordinance to lower it.
Oh, I think that's,
Yeah, I don't know that we
Yeah.
want to bury it in here.
Yeah, we
know.
No,
Well, that's
that might
what-
be
that's
more of
what
a
I'm getting
general
at, yeah.
comment, but
Okay.
on Mr. McLean's master list.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the zoning ordinance, it needs a lot of
Needs a
pretty
lot of-
comprehensive work, so I think it's okay to keep adding things to the list.
And the other thing that was mentioned, I think in your memo, Tim, was a 5-foot green belt.
Yeah.
Yes,
I would
that's-
be in favor of that.
I would too, personally.
On 11 Mile?
Yeah.
I know, it's
Lot of
tough,
land- That's a lot of land.
but
5
I mean,
feet's
I-
really
I
not unreasonable.
understand. These are not
Can't
deep
do
lots on 11 Mile.
I know, but it'd be nice to see some green along there.
I agree, Ms. Kaplansky. I totally agree, but I'm thinking of the property that is, and the depth of the lots along there and what that would, you know, we'll have
Yeah.
to look at that, I think, to see.
I think, again, that could go into our parking ordinance, something along that line. I'd like to see that as our standard for any parking lot that abuts the sidewalk.
I
And
agree.
anywhere in the city.
I agree
Minimum
too.
5 foot of green
Agreed.
space.
So some sort of perimeter parking lot landscaping.
Right, yep, yep.
So is a car lot a parking lot?
I also think that in extraordinary cases where you just don't have the room to put a 5-foot green belt in, we could have some sort of substitution. We could.
Like a
there could-
hedgerow or something.
Exactly. We could waive that and have something else instead that
Right.
provides an equivalent or something like that. It doesn't have to be an absolute standard, but it should be the baseline from which you're operating.
I agree.
And then,
I
you know,
agree.
as the city redevelops over time, you will gradually get that nice little bit of green in there.
Okay, as long as there's an alternative. All right, so I think that goes into a different ordinance,
You've rewritten half.
Yeah, sorry.
the green belt. And Ms. Kaplansky, is there anything else you want to
No,
undo tonight?
that's it.
Okay. Now's your chance, let's get it out there. So, Mr. McLean, make sure that we have note that our parking ordinance needs to be addressed and our lighting ordinance needs to be addressed. But for this particular ordinance, we have the minimum building size and the prohibition of loudspeakers and PA systems. Did I gather it all? All right.
Are we in a position where we feel comfortable to set a public hearing date, or do you feel we're not there yet?
Mr.
Not
Richardson?
apropos of that, but another thought regarding the content of the ordinance. I'm just wondering if we need to address signage. Auto lots generally have gaudy signage with flags and, you know,
Should they
things that
be-
call attention.
Should they be more limited to?
I don't
More
know if-
limited than our existing sign ordinance?
I don't know, I'm just bringing that up as a kind of last minute thought because of the way auto lots generally do their street advertising.
Okay. Does our existing sign ordinance address that?
Great question.
I don't think it does.
I don't have it in front of me to look, but generally speaking, what I would say about that is that I would address it in the sign ordinance so that it applies equally to all users. And I think the way that you could address that in the sign ordinance is, really there are 3 types of signs. You have your signs that require a permit, signs that don't require a permit, and signs that are prohibited. And signs that are prohibited, generally speaking, you try to prohibit them on the basis of health, safety, and welfare concerns. So signs that move can be distracting to drivers. So pennants, things that flutter, those annoying feather-shaped things on the poles that go like this all the time. Those are things that I think you can prohibit on that basis. Signs that move with the wind, that flutter. And
In the little guy that does this?
well, yeah, exactly. Two-man would fall under that, I think. And you know, other things that you would do is, you know, signs that are meant to imitate a an ASHTO traffic control device or something like that. You can't put a stop sign somewhere that might confuse drivers, signs that flash, signs that emit odors, signs that smoke or something like that. You know, I mean, basically,
There's signs that smoke.
well, I mean, have you ever been to Times Square? But, you know, those are the kinds of things that you might put in a prohibited signs list.
Most of those, I mean, there's not one specifying smoke, but I'm going through and most
Right.
of those are on there.
I think we cover most of it now.
Yeah.
So, and I think the little, you know, pennants and things that are probably piquing your concern are probably covered based on the language that we have in there right now.
So my personal opinion is that the sign ordinance that extends to the entire city should be the same for whether you have a car lot, or you have a Taco Bell, or you have a gift shop.
I don't disagree,
yeah,
it's just that the nature of auto dealerships has called my attention to the topic of signs.
Understood.
It should be addressed.
So if our ordinance should apply universally to all of our business owners. So, put that on the list. To revisit the sign ordinance in like 2024 when we get through the rest of the ordinances. All right, so back to Mr. McLean's question is, with the two additions of the minimum building size and the addition or the prohibition of loudspeakers and or PA systems, can this ordinance go to public hearing? Or do we need to see it again?
I think it can. Based on our discussion tonight, he can add those two things to the ordinance, and I feel that if we had a problem with the way they were worded, the change would be minor enough that we could amend it on the table
All right.
and move it along. I think we
Agree?
could set a public hearing for June.
Okay, so I don't know that we need a vote on that, because this is a discussion item. So, Mr. McLean, you have your instructions. Are there any comments from the public on the automobile sales portion of the 11-mile district? Please come forward, say your name and your city residence.
Wendy Zabramski, Berkley. I just have, it's more a question, and I know you guys can't respond, or maybe you can answer it. Has there been an interest in an automobile lot, or is this just because you're spending a lot of time on it and, you know, there isn't one there? I was just curious.
Well, I think I can answer that. So there is kind of an auto lot there with Matrix Motors.
Yeah.
And we also talked about it, and you may not have been here, about the Woodward Avenue and the, you know, potential interest that there could be because of the, you know, historic nature of the automobile along Woodward Avenue and what we would do about the 11-mile district. And we just wanted to kind of make sure that if one were to develop, it developed according to our wishes and ordinances versus something that gets put there and then we want to, you know.
Okay, so it's got to do with the auto. There's not like somebody lined up to do this. We don't.
Not that we're,
No, not that
not that
we're
we're
aware of.
aware of.
It just kind of arose and it became a
Okay.
discussion item and
I think we actually segued to this from a discussion
Yeah.
of Woodward.
I think, yes, exactly, so. All right, if there's no other comments, Mr. McLean, you have your instructions. Come back, schedule the public hearing, and we'll move on from this one. All righty. Our next discussion item is ordinance amendment, Chapter 138, Article 6, Division 7, Site Plan Review. And this is to amend Section 138.170, or 678, Administrative Review, adding the following. Item number 3, the structure requiring site plan review is an accessory structure. An accessory structure must conform to the site standards according to Chapter 138, Article 3, Division 1 of the Berkley Code of Ordinances, and then adding a sentence to the final paragraph. An applicant seeking an accessory structure exceeding the size permitted by ordinance would have to apply for a dimensional variance with the Zoning Board of Appeals. So this is increasing the administrative review capabilities of the city and removing things from our docket that are, that
Like
we
tonight.
feel that, yeah, that we feel largely can fall in our capable city staff's hands. So, comments? Who would like to start? Mr. Tangari.
Generally speaking, I'm in favor of that. You know, I think the threshold is the thing to discuss. It's really the item of discussion for me. I'm in favor of the idea in general.
Okay. Mr. Smith, you're uncharacteristically silent on that.
I am.
All right. And Ms. Kowalski?
I'll go. So if a structure is accessory to the principal use, it would be smaller than the principal use theoretically, right? Maybe opposite of what Mr. Tangari is thinking. I don't think we need a threshold. I think that we can trust the staff to determine whether or not an accessory structure is compliant with the ordinance requirements and go on from there. My other comment is the part about seeking a dimensional variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I guess I'm wondering why that's included or necessary. Pointing out just the portion about exceeding the size. I mean, wouldn't also, if it was not in compliance with the setback, seek a variance, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that we need that last sentence, but I don't have a problem with any accessory structure being reviewed and approved administratively.
I agree. I think that's a function that staff can handle, and the applicant can come here if they can't work it out with the staff.
Mr. Rob?
Feel the same way?
Well, I was just going to say, in the past, and I imagine it's continuing now, if the staff has any doubts, tell them to come before Planning Commission.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
They can refer it to us, sure.
They can refer it to
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
Okay.
but I think the zoning, they need to know that they can go to zoning board of appeals
For a variance.
for variances.
As for the ZBA, that would apply to
applies
any
to everything.
any
Applies to
requirement of the
everything,
ordinance.
everything, but
Yeah.
at least-
So
But
I
it's in
don't.
writing, and then they can read it.
So do we have a size permitted by ordinance specified?
400 square feet. No,
That is. Is there a number?
No.
All right, so
No,
we want to
because every
remove.
site's different.
So we want to remove an applicant seeking an accessory structure would have to, do we want to just remove that sentence then? We want to reword it so that there is some possibility to send them to it, because if there's no size permitted by ordinance.
You're referring to the last sentence? Well, I would agree with Ms. Kaplansky to remove it. It's what attorneys like to call
Yep,
surplusage.
Yeah.
And
Surplusage.
the
It's a good
the
word.
staff can inform the applicant of can hand them a sheet informing them what their options are. I mean,
I think it's not
you know,
non-conforming.
so I don't think it needs to be in the legalese of the ordinance.
I don't think it hurts, though.
Well-
You're gonna
Gives
list everything that's
it allows they're gonna be able to see, people will be able to see that there is an option if things don't go their way, the way they want it, that there can go before the ZBA.
But what triggers that?
But isn't it already in there, in our ordinance?
It
Yeah,
is.
It is.
Again, that's being redundant in the ordinance. It's in the ordinance,
I know.
period. So,
Then I think, to
All right,
have it
take
here,
it
then
out.
we have to build a whole
Okay.
substructure that supports the size and dimensional variance and all of that stuff. Okay.
I'm guessing that the idea was to make it clear that it's not like completely administrative, like even the ZBA allows some administrative approval. But I think that's covered where it says it must conform to site standards. So upon that, you know that they don't just have carte blanche.
Right.
Right, it's not arbitrary at all.
Okay, remove that last sentence. Do we have to have a public hearing on this one as well?
Yep.
All right, add it to the other one. Let's do two birds, one public hearing. All right, do we have any comments from the public?
Annalise Petras from Berkley on Franklin. So I guess my one, maybe it's a question or maybe it's a clarification that could be added, but for a PUD, this would not be allowed for an accessory structure because they wrote their own rules. So if you built an apartment building, say it's rather large, do you then get to add a carport without coming back to Planning Commission? You know.
I'm happy to address that if you
Yes,
like.
right.
Because a planned unit development is subject to a master deed and bylaws that would be approved by the city council, and the site plan is an exhibit to that master deed and bylaws, In order to make a change to their site, they would have to amend their master deed and bylaws, which would require at a minimum city council approval. And if it was considered to be a significant change to the site plan itself, they would come here prior to going to the to the city council.
Okay,
So it's a revision of their PUD.
great, thanks.
Question or comment too. I'm confused. I'm still Wendy.
Glad to hear it.
I'm confused now, site plan, meaning any changes anybody wanted to make that the staff can, no, please help me
No.
out.
So
I
there's
don't
some
have
cha-
the copy of that.
That's okay. So there's some changes that are fairly small.
Mm-hmm.
And so currently, even though small changes kind of, they come, well, there's some things that the staff can do. And then there's a line in the sand, and then they come here. So we're just kind of we're moving the line a little bit to give staff a little bit more administrative and pull things off our docket where it really is within the expertise and purview of the city staff to make those determinations. So,
I guess the reason for my concern is that, when Amy was here and that whole Vincetta garage, kind of went through and I don't know, I just,
Specific to accessory structures.
accessory, that's what I was trying to get down to.
That's a
It's not-
great point.
okay.
That's a great point.
are there any other comments? All righty, so Mr. McLean, you can add that to the public hearing as well for the next go-round. All right, so we have a discussion item, the survey results for proposed public participation plan. Mr. McLean, the floor is yours.
So I compiled the results of the public participation survey and kind of did a summary of comments we received at the open house. And based on what we saw in the survey and based on a lot of the comments we received at the open house, I feel like we can proceed with drafting a public participation plan. That's an undertaking that I'm happy to do, and what I'm recommending we do is once there's a draft in place, we bring it back and have some type of public hearing or open house for public comments to say, this is what we've drafted. Community members, what do you think? Do you want to see things added? Do you love it?
And I think we can do that as a discussion item here at Planning Commission. It doesn't have to go through a formal public hearing. I don't know that any other community has put their public participation plan through public hearing.
So, yeah,
Typically
just
they're-
maybe an extended public comment period or something.
Absolutely.
It's not an ordinance.
Put it as part of our packet, put it as discussion, leave it open for public comment, and we can incorporate those in.
Yeah, that's my recommendation with proceeding with the public participation plan.
So was there anything in particular that your takeaway from the survey and/or the public input session that led you down a different path than some of the model plans we had looked at that you'd provided to us on your suggestion that we adopt this process?
Well, I feel like our plan is going to look very similar to what, the model plans look like, the comments we have, the things our residents are wanting and public participation. I think those are things that have been addressed in other plans, so really, I think our plan's going to look a lot like, what's out there.
Okay.
I don't feel like we have to reinvent the wheel with it.
So for the sake of the viewing audience and our substantial yet smaller audience tonight, how many respondents did we have?
We had 54 respondents to the survey.
Okay. And we had about, 7 or 8 at the public hearing, or at the
That's-
public meeting?
Yes, that's
Public session,
correct.
Okay. So my message to the public is participate more. We need better representation of our 15,000 residents of Berkeley.
Especially
Or
that
more.
18 to 30 age range.
Is that low?
That was
Right.
low, but I think that that's kind of given, right, at 20?
Yeah.
In my 20s, I
Maybe
didn't
we need
really
a
care.
Snapchat or a
Twitter?
Vine. No.
Twitter's so
Snapchat
old
survey, all the
people, don't you know?
results that disappear.
So I'm trying to figure out if that makes me too
President uses
old because I don't
Twitter.
use Twitter or not quite old yet.
He's in his
And
own.
then, were there any surprises on the forms of communication that was desired by from the survey? I mean, that people wanted to see it differently than what they're currently getting it? Was,
Nothing surprising. One of the takeaways, we did have is that, for sessions like the open house we had, we do a lot of our communication through the city Facebook page. And, maybe these types of open houses, we set them up as a Facebook event so that it's on there constantly, whereas just a posting, you see it one time, whereas an event, it's up there and everybody can see it, all the time. So it stays fresh in everybody's mind.
Yeah, updates to the event itself actually keep popping up, yeah.
And I did see a number of comments that they liked the idea of surveys, so
Yeah.
that's,
That's
I think, an easy one to implement on a
Electronically,
particular
yeah.
subject.
so we had a 70% satisfaction with the way they receive information on planning and development. That's pretty good.
Dig into it.
No, I did, but I just didn't bring it with me. So I didn't commit it to, I don't have an eidetic memory.
Yeah, I
unfortunately,
don't
like
either.
Sheldon.
My brother.
Okay, are there any citizen comments on the survey and the survey results? I assume they were made available through the same link that we got them?
Yes.
Annalise Petrus again. So I guess I was surprised that there weren't pictures of the comments that people made. The summary is rather generic, and so I think some of the comments were specific to the city, and then now it's just getting distilled to be generic again. So it seemed like people took pictures of the comments, so maybe there could be relooking at that as this participation plans are drafted.
Are you referring to the whiteboards that we had at the meetings?
Yeah, with the
Yep.
Post-its.
I still have those. I'm happy to make some photos. We can get those up on Facebook.
Okay, that'd be great. And then I guess, so I'm just really curious, like, what is the plan for the plan? Like, what are the steps? There's a participation plan, maybe there's a redevelopment thing that's happening, there's a master plan, there's an ordinance, like, how does this all flow together? How do the other departments come together? Like, I just would like to be informed about that.
So that's actually a very good question, and I can answer that. So we're kind of in a little bit of a five-way intersection that doesn't normally happen. I mean, typically we have the master planning process, and it happens, and we move on. It happens, and that's our only focus. But we have kind of a lot on our plate right now. So we have the complete streets that were adopted by City Council, and so we were given our mandate for complete streets. We have a new and energetic Downtown Development Authority who just got Main Street designation. So that, and they had a design input program that kind of hits on our doorstep too. We have the master plan that's due, which is required by law, so that actually takes priority over everything. And then we also have, let's just say, kind of a renaissance in Berkeley, for lack of a better word. We have a modernization because we have, a great deal of investment now. We've come out of the area, have come out of the recession, and we have kind of a changing business culture all throughout the southeastern Michigan. And so we need to adapt to that to harness our piece and portion of that, and also in context of what our residents want. So kind of like all the bills are due at once. My tuition bill's due, my mortgage is due, my car bill's due, my insurance bill. So we have to deal with that. So what we'll do is kind of administratively, Mr. McLean will develop a prioritization, kind of a skeleton key for us as the planning commission to work from. We'll give him input on that says, no, we think this is a higher priority than that. But there are things that by law we have to do first. And there's things that will cascade out of some of those processes that will impact the other processes. And from that, we'll fine tune and prioritize. So I think the goal is over the next couple of months from our city manager and our city our economic development director, is that they'll create that kind of starting prioritization list for us, because we're also kind of overwhelmed at the thought of all the things that need to be done. And it came up today, well, we need to deal with lighting, and we need to deal with noise, and we need to deal with parking. But all of these things have effects. So this is, I can't remember my physics, but an object in motion stays in motion until a force is put upon it. But these objects are all in motion with all sorts of forces all over them. So I hope I don't get any hate mail about my lack of remembering of physics. But we have to think about how everything we're going to do and what it's going to bleed into and what it's going to impact and how that then rises to have to be dealt with. So some of that's going to have to be, we have to kind of figure out a skeleton key here and start. So you have good questions, we have the same questions, but we have a lot to deal with over the next year and a half. We will have a consultant that will come on board, a planning consultant who will help us, who is skilled in these matters and can keep us, can keep that 10,000-foot view so that we can get into the weeds and deal with some of the things that need to be dealt with, but will help keep us on kind of a path. So it's going to be a challenge.
There's a lot of pieces.
So everything has an impact that we do.
Great.
So, all right.
Thank you for the summary.
You're welcome.
Ms. Chair, Madam Chair, I have a question for Mr. McLean, or
Sure.
perhaps yourself as well. To what extent, if any, is the plan that you're going to draft going to apply to other city departments, other city functions? Will it apply to city council? I mean, what is the back? We've talked about the impetus for developing this plan, and I'm just wondering if the certification of the plan it means that it's going to have to apply citywide to all departments.
Well, I think looking at RRC, I think these plans are intended, there's a heavy emphasis on the planning and development side, but there's the committee that just was formed by the city council, regarding communications. So I think a lot of those efforts are gonna, overlap. So I think the plan needs to address, citywide public participation and not just planning and development.
Okay.
All the stakeholders of the city.
Right, and we also have the Citizens Engagement Advisory Committee that we have to kind of mesh
Yes,
this
that's the
plan.
committee I was- yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
so that adds some new complexity into the game. I mean, there is a lot, and I think that, it's my understanding Tim and Matt will kind of draft out, Mr. McLean and Mr. Baumgarten will kind of draft out what they see as the priorities and what will drive the next move, because we need a roadmap. And that's what they're here for.
Thank you.
All right. Other comments? Okay. So, liaison reports. Environmental Committee?
Well, our next meeting is day after tomorrow, Thursday. We're going to be meeting at 6 p.m. in the Public Safety Conference Room, second floor. The committee is going to resume sponsoring a bike corral at the Berkley Art Bash. We're going to be located at the south intersection of Gardner and 12 Mile this year. And we encourage people to visit the Art Bash either on foot or on their bikes. If they choose to ride their bikes, we will look after their bikes and return them safely to their owners. It's a much more pleasant way to get there than hunting around for parking spaces. A greener and more benign way of getting there. I don't know if you buy a huge picture, if you want to be biking home with that picture.
You could use it
He'll
as a
carry it
sail.
home. The environmental committee will carry it home.
But I didn't say that. But there are, I'm sure, arrangements can be made in that respect. The same would be true for a huge vase, I suppose, if you bought that. But we've had good success with it in the past, and anybody that wants to volunteer to help us with it, contact myself or come to the meeting Thursday.
All right, Chamber?
I was unable to attend, but I do know that they are gearing up for the Art Bash. You can go to the Chamber's website and I think their Facebook site to look up information, and also to volunteer. There's a link that you can sign up to volunteer.
So for our viewing audience, when is Art Bash?
Art Bash is June 9th.
All righty. ZBA, we don't have a member for. We have DDA.
Well, you already mentioned it, but I will also mention again that Berkeley is now a Main Street Oakland County community at the select level. Main Street Oakland County is a pretty unique program. Aren't really many county level Main Street programs in the country, and to the extent that there are, it's because Oakland County did it first. So it's a unique thing, unique to our little part of the state. And they do some actually really interesting and helpful work for Main Streets across the county. I know they've done some work with Clawson, for instance. So that I think is good. In general, that just the energy level at the DDA is very high right now. And I think that there's a lot of things happening. And, you've probably seen the murals around town. And that's one of their other recent initiatives. But yeah, in general, I think that it's exciting that we finally got ourselves tapped into Main Street Oakland County, because we are one of the principal main streets of Oakland County, and not to have participated to this point always felt a little incongruous to me. So.
All righty. So, City Council met last night. They appointed a full slate to the Citizens Engagement Committee, Advisory Committee, excuse me, and they approved the special land use request for the flexible office space on Coolidge. So, those were good. We'll go around the room and see if anybody has any additional comments.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
Before we do the roundtable,
Okay.
and I don't want to steal her thunder, but I'd like to congratulate Commissioner Kempner on completing the Michigan State University Citizen Planner course.
Very good.
All right, guys.
It's a grueling
Okay, well, then you can
course.
start off our comments.
Yes, I finished that. There is an option to become a master citizen planner. You get to take a test. The more difficult part for me, I think, is figuring out when to do, because I would have 60 days to do a 20-minute presentation, either to Planning Commission or City Council, based on one of the topics there. Kind of a hard time of the year to do that, just because this is crazy, and council only meets once a month, and so now that I'm past Berkeley days, I'll try and wrap my head around that part. The one thing I do want to mention that it was really drilled into a lot of those lessons was minutes and making sure that you're doing findings of facts, which I'm not sure our minutes do super well. We should be hitting those standards, and it should be listing like what our opinions are, what our reasons for approving or not approving those standards are. Because if it were to go to court, the court's not going to watch the video. They're going to look at our approved minutes. That's the only official record. So we might want to do a better job at making sure we're hitting those.
Mr. Tungary?
To pick up on that, one of the communities that I work for actually provides sample motions for planning commissioners, one denying, one approving, and the sample motion of approval is basically, this meets all the standards of the ordinance and blah, 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 blah. The kinds of things that you would include in a motion anyway, but I think it makes it a little simpler for for planning commissioners to make that kind of thorough motion. And obviously, that takes some preparation time on the part of staff. So, of course, that's something that you would have to defer to staff on whether or not there's the bandwidth, to provide that. But it is something that is done in certain communities, usually with larger departments than poor Tim. Yeah, as far as my own comments, I don't really have too many other than I am glad to be digging into our zoning ordinance. It's something that I've been thinking about the whole time I've been on the commission, and I've, in the last couple weeks, have started making it evening reading just for, as many times as I can a week, just to kind of try to check some things that are in there and aren't in there, and ultimately I'll try to formalize those thoughts, but it gets me ready to sleep. So there's that. But yeah, I have been really trying to look through our ordinance and try to do a little bit of a checkup on it and organize my thoughts on some of the things that might be needed in terms of amendments.
Shadle?
Just a big thank you to all those that made Berkeley Days as successful as it was. I think it was wonderful, although there were some periods of inclement weather. It still was, I think, a success overall, and that's a huge undertaking. So just a thank you to those that made that possible.
Mr. Burnett?
A couple of things. This book that we have for the ordinances, this thing, doesn't really address changes that were made. I believe it was in 2008. Is that when they overhauled the big black binder?
Yes, it was 2007 or 8.
Yeah. And this doesn't really reflect that, because I've been looking at that. So it's interesting. That's that thing. Let me just say something about the first person that came before us tonight. And my issue with the utilities. In my previous life, I had to do a lot of dealing with utilities and easements. And so I'm very familiar with them, and especially our electrical company that we deal with on a daily basis. So that's why I was concerned about the easement and the power lines going over. I know there's one building in Berkeley that has surprised me, and it's in existence for a long time. And there was an addition put on the back of it. It's on 11 Mile Road, and it's a metal addition. And I will tell you this, there are buku power lines running across over that building. And I have always thought, whoa, if something happens, I wouldn't want to be in that building, being metal. So that's why my concern was tonight on the issue of it's just been pushed into my head for a long, long time about these issues, and I've had to deal with it in the past. So forgive me if it took up a lot of time, but so be it.
Mr. Murad?
Just invite everybody to go to the Art Bash, June 9th.
Ms. Kaplansky?
Nothing.
Mr. Richardson?
Just acknowledging upcoming Memorial Day. It doesn't feel much like summer yet, but every now and then we can do well to remind ourselves that the holiday isn't just about cookouts. It's about those who have sacrificed their lives, that we can have public meetings and deliberate about decisions in a democratic fashion. So happy Memorial Day.
Mr. Smith?
Well, Mr. Richardson stole my thunder. I thought I was going to get to say it, but that's okay. I agree. Memorial Day is a very important holiday to reflect on those people that allow us to sit here and do what we do, and it's very important. Another item that came up is this beekeeping thing. This is not really an issue, but Mr. McLean, if you can't speak of it, that's fine, but that could be a real nuisance. And I'm just curious, has there been any, looking at the photographs, these are little tiny lots, and I think it's a case like we talked past with the air conditioner and generators. They don't want to look at it, but their neighbors have to. It's right on the property line. Is there any information that you can pass along? If you can't, that's fine, but.
Currently, our ordinance does not address anything, regarding beekeeping, and I've started to look at other communities. I don't necessarily think, we need to prohibit beekeeping, but, the Planning Commission could establish standards where hives have to be located a certain number of feet, from adjoining property lines.
Well, as far as a nuisance, the person that wrote the letter talked about they'd like to build a fence, and I don't know what the fence, the bees don't really respect fences, but they can't even get back there to build a fence. It just seems to me that that's something that, nuisance animals, put it down our ordinance.
It's kind of a gray area regarding nuisance.
Yeah, I was kind of, I didn't know that that existed in town, but, okay, thank you.
So, as a daughter of a military man and the sister of a military man and the aunt of a military woman and the stepmother of a active duty military man, please have a happy and safe Memorial Day and remember all those who served, and let us be and allow us this freedom to do what we do here. And on that, I will entertain a motion to close and dismiss the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.